M&M's melt in your mouth, not
Welcome,
in your
everybody!
Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea. You're listening to Jams and Tea.
Ready to the next episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea, and August interrupts me by trying to do weird shit.
It's a bit!
It's a bit, Jake. It calls back to the last
Then
episode.
you should have prepped him.
That's
No.
Morgan's right.
I prepped him in the group chat like 4 days ago.
Today we're going to be
Oh.
discussing two new records, Microphones in 2020 by the Microphones and Skeleton Coast by the Lawrence.
That is,
Skeleton Tree? What?
And
That's a record.
In our Record Club episode, which will be separate to this one, we will be discussing Autechre's seminal release LP5.
Finally talking about Autechre.
But
Autechre.
finally, we have an avenue to discuss Autechre. First, let's jump into what we've been listening to. 5 records each from the last 7 days. Jake, why don't you lead us off?
All right. Well, I have just to let you know what my music volume of listening to in the past couple of days has been. Even fucking Last FM was just like, you've been listening to an unusual amount of music, and I'm just like, well, maybe go fuck yourself. Don't judge me. I listened to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I listened to 10 albums yesterday, so this is my life. Pity me.
Well, pick 5.
I am. The first one I'm going to be talking about is Heaven or Las Vegas by Cocteau Twins. I'm getting into Cocteau Twins because of Zach, who was on an episode of this podcast, being a huge fan, and Tyler also subsequently getting into them. Kind of a dream pop, shoegazy music duo, one of which has contributed several film music scores, including the film Mysterious Skin, which has one of the best soundtracks of all time. And if you like that soundtrack, you're probably going to like Cocteau Twins. And Heaven or Las Vegas is my favorite of theirs I've listened to so far. I've also listened to Bluebell Knoll and Treasure. And Heaven or Las Vegas is just a perfectly blissful, sugary dream pop album that is it is exactly what I think of when I think of the genre. It is gorgeous to listen to. Every single song is pitch fucking perfect. I cannot wait to actually own that. It's a perfect I want to buy this and listen to it on vinyl, just because the quality of the sound is so crisp and beautiful, and it's perfect. I listened to it while driving home the other night, and there was a sunset, and it was beautiful. So I would recommend listening to that album. Besides that, another album I listened to, as I am going back through the catalog of one of my favorite artists currently working, and that is one Miss Chelsea Wolfe, who I did a worst to best to a couple of years ago on this channel that I'm going to be redoing because she has since released new material, and my order of her discography has changed since then. But I listened to my favorite of hers, which is the album Apocalypsis, which I ordered on vinyl just because I forgot how much I loved it. And Apocalypsis is a folk album from the deepest pits of hell. I love it. It is genuine. When I listen to that album, I'm just like, this album sounds like it is haunted, like a deep, like a demon from the pits of hell has possessed it, and I'm listening to something that is infecting my brain. There's a song on it called it's an instrumental piece near the end called Through the Forest Towards the Sea, and I've never heard music before that can be described as Lovecraftian. That, on the other hand, can be. It's fucking great, as is all of Chelsea's work, but that is distinctly remains my favorite. Is a great album. Check that out and listen to her. She basically minorly reinvents her entire sound on almost every album, so there is something to love for everybody.
I just want to say, speaking of worst to best videos, I want to plug the one I did in the week to try and
to tie in with the Biffy Clyro episode we're doing next week. They are one of my favourite bands, and I had a great time making it.
It's a great video too. Go watch it. It's the worst to best is.
Even if you haven't heard
content.
the Glyro record before, it's still a really entertaining video. I'd recommend checking it out. It will give you.
It will make you want to listen to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly.
And maybe it did.
Yeah. There you go. And I also listened to I've been sort of going back to prepare for this episode. I've been going back through Phil Elverum's catalog, both in the Microphones and Mount Erie. And my favorite release of his that I didn't get to previously that I got to now is the album Clear Moon, which is sort of made in conjunction with another album of his, Ocean Roar, which is also good. But Clear Moon is stellar. Just encompasses so many different of his musical styles. Like there's parts of it that are very folky, parts of it that are very droney, but it's so consistently exciting and lush. It has a really dense sound to it. Absolutely gorgeous listen. And it's not a hugely long record. Like I feel that record is like listening to something ancient being unearthed. And it's just like you witnessing this religious apocrypha. It's beautiful. Loved that.
Wait until you listen to his atmospheric black metal album.
What is that? What is that?
Well, it's partly inspired by atmospheric black metal. It's not full bore, but Wind's Poem.
Is it Sauna? Oh no, it's Wind's Poem. Okay. Well, then that'll be fun.
Yeah,
for the fourth record I'll talk about, I will talk about one I have a visual aid for, and that is Porcupine Tree's The Sky Moves Sideways, which I have on vinyl here. Came today. Perfect time.
Pink Floyd 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Yes, actually. If you like Pink Floyd, this is a easy recommend, not just because it sounds like Pink Floyd, but because the album in its original form and track list actually mimics the exact same structure as Wish You Were Here, with the sort of the dual part song beginning and ending the album, same track list number. I have a miniature rant about this album, though. This is the first Porcupine Tree album.
Listen to it.
Thank you. This is the first Porcupine Tree album I ever listened to, and I wasn't hugely into it when I first heard it just because it was obviously very Pink Floyd derivative, but I just feel like it was a bad introduction to this part of the band. And I was never able to fully appreciate it. And I went back and listened to it over the years, and like I would come away with wildly different opinions of it each time, and it was just very strange. Come to find out that there are at least 3 different versions of this record, all with different track lists, with different versions of the same song on each of them. And for the remastered edition, the edition that I have on vinyl, the track list for this and the track list for the digital version of the album that comes with this are different. Why? What? And the way in which it is different is confounding, because for whatever reason, on the digital edition, it has an alternate version of the title track, The Sky Moves Sideways, which is originally split into 2 parts and bookends the album. And then it is reintroduced all together, one 30-minute long song, again, but it's not at the end of the album like a bonus track. It is before the final 2 tracks. So it completely ruins the flow of the album for a musical passage that you've already heard, because the other 2 parts of the song are already on there.
That's really funny.
Like why? So, all that said, this version of the album on vinyl here is the way you should listen to it. I will go more into this when I redo my Porcupine Tree worst to best list. This album's specific placement is going to change quite a bit. I do love this record and would recommend it, not as a first album, but definitely as like, if you're just interested in this kind of music, it is an easy recommend to people. It's just that the track list is fucking whack and weird, and Steven, why did you do this? Anyway,
you've complimented so much. You've complimented so much in the past how Stephen Wilson treats his vinyl releases.
Exactly. I'm just like, why the fuck is it like this, dude?
Hey, what?
But like it gets in the way of how many people can enjoy the album, and that kills me. But I listened to 3 different albums from or no, was it 3 or 2? It was 2 albums from a band I had not previously heard, and that is Yola Tango. And I listened to both Painful and Then Nothing Turned Itself Inside Out, both of which I was told are good like nighttime records, and that was what I was going for. And I liked both of them immensely. I think that I preferred Painful, actually, just because like I feel it's a more consistent record. Like I gave them both like the same very high score, but I feel that and then Nothing just kind of goes up and down in a bit more like from a track-to-track basis, whereas Painful is a bit more of a focused endeavor, and so I gravitate towards it more. Also has a fucking killer closing track. Very good mood music, kind of a shoegazy rock kind of thing.
And yet you haven't listened to what I would consider the 2 essential Yola Tango
records. Well, I like to build up to those records because I don't want to spoil myself.
You need to listen to the whole, like, that sequence of 4. So, Painful, Electra Pura, I Can Hear the Heart Beating is 1, and Then Nothing. You've listened to the bookends, and you get to the real meat of the more aggressive sounding records, which are those 2 in the middle.
I'm excited.
The other work of theirs that I would consider essential is their score for Old Joy.
Old Joy,
of course. Yeah. Yes. Honestly,
which I use a soundtrack for video essay I edited for Game Mechanics on Firewatch, because it's just so good.
Honestly,
and you can listen to it outside of the movie. It's just amazing.
You have to watch the movie, yeah. I say that that series of 4 albums, but honestly, if you keep going beyond that to the Summer Sun, the brilliantly titled "I'm Not Afraid of You" and "I Will Beat Your Ass," popular songs, and Fade. Those are the next 4 albums after that series of 4, and they're almost as good as well. Incredible run of albums.
Well, yeah.
But yeah.
Those are 5 albums I listened to.
And I have a joke that I will try to get in ever since you talked about Sky Moves Sideways and the Pink Floyd reference came up. And I wanted to say my joke, which is that I want Phoebe Bridgers to make a prog album and call it "Wish You Were Queer."
Oh my god!
She would you need to tweet that because she would retweet it.
I may do that.
Not only will she retweet it, she will absolutely consider making it first.
Or at least
it'll be a title of a song on the next Boy Genius EP.
And it will eliminate the existence of Billie Eilish's "Wish You Were Gay."
I didn't even think of that song, but yeah, exactly. Anyway, who's up next? August.
August.
Oh yes. So this week I started up listening to the discography of one Rush.
Yes.
I've kind of chronicled my saga to these folks here, so I'll chronicle it to you, the listener, viewer, whatever you may be. Rush, self-titled. I like it. It's kind of exactly like everything else I've heard from the time, but it's a good album. Fly By Night. A bit better than their first album. I like that. I think they're definitely taking a step in the right direction towards their more progressive rock sound with some missteps along the way, but overall, slight improvement. Then Caress of Steel, which I think is kind of a step down because outside of the first track, Bastille Day, which is fantastic, I find a lot of the more progressive stuff on that album to fall a little flat because it sounds kind of disjointed and disconnected.
Yep.
But those are their first 3 albums.
That's you have the consensus opinion on all of those. Like that is really exactly what I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really rushing through their discography.
God damn it.
I am just really annoyed that they never made an album called Russians. Or that their fan base.
I hate both of you so powerfully right now.
All right, let's get into the next album I listened to for this week, which was Mount Erie by the Mircophones. An album that is
Microphones by Mount Erie. It's a joke.
I'm not sure that it was.
early onset dyslexia. That's what it was.
Early onset dementia, more like. I really don't get what's that funny.
What's funny is I drank this entire bottle of beer very fast.
Anyway, you listened to Mount Erie by the Mircophones.
Yeah, I like it a good deal. It's a very conceptual, interesting kind of drone folk fusion. I really like what it's going for. And I like the way that it all kind of flows together into this one beautiful piece.
Mm.
And the last album, a la Saoirse's kind of big video, I listened to Only Revolutions by Biffy Clyro.
Oh.
Which I enjoyed. I think it's a good album. I find some of the songs to be a little obnoxious in terms of I kind of can't dig with all of the writing on that album, but like the highlights just soar so high, I can almost forgive that. Songs like oh boy, what's the second one on that called?
Songs like
yeah, exactly.
That Golden Rule is the second track.
I think you'll really enjoy Vertigo of Bliss, August.
Yeah.
Sort of a post-hardcore album mixed with their progressive stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that, like, the tracks that soar high, like the second song, that Golden Rule, songs like Bubbles and many of Horror are songs that I all really dig, and they make up for the parts I'm not so into, but overall, I'm glad I checked it out. It's not bad.
Fun fact, as I mentioned on the episode, but fun fact, Josh Homme of the Queens of the Stone Age did the guitar solo for Bubbles.
Oh, that's sick. Cool.
I thought you said my balls.
My
favorite Biffy Clyro song.
I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't.
Okay, Morgan, I believe you are.
Indeed. So, most notably, this week I listened to two more Autechre records.
Oh,
those being Incunabula and Trirepete. Is that how you say both of those things?
I think you got Incunabula right, but I say no, Trirepete. That's right.
Okay.
That's how I always thought it was.
Yeah. Some people say Trirepete, but I believe that's not correct Latin. Even though Trirepete is not actually real Latin, it's a made-up phrase.
It is. I would know. I took 3 years of Latin.
They're the kind of guys who will like make you think their album is something like Latin, and it'll actually just be a joke.
Yeah.
Thus far, my ranking would be Amber, then Trirepete, and then LP5, and then Incunabula. Yeah, we'll get more into that later. In that similar vein, I listened to Aphex Twin's selected ambient works, the first one. Just a little bit of background on why I'm burning through all of these so quickly is I've been reading a lot this past week. I've read 2 books this week, so those I've been looking for a lot of ambient shit to put on in the background whilst I do so. They're all good.
Mm-hmm.
They're all real good. I mean, Incunabula is like Light 7. I'm not crazy about it. I enjoyed it. But
Yeah,
I probably
Pinky Nebula is definitely my least favorite of the ones that you listed.
yeah, it's definitely just,
It's
especially
very,
in retrospect, like
it's very boilerplate.
Yeah.
EDM. Yeah, but
You
it's
need to try a Bass Communion album when you're reading, Morgan.
okay. Following that, I listened to the Lawrence Arms Metropole, which was their most recent album before the one we are covering today. It's better than the one we're covering today, but not by a whole lot.
Ouch.
That's
So
standing
these-
with take praise.
This band has released 2 albums in the last 14 years, and they should stop. It's over. Call it a day, fellas.
What's that line on the Mircophones album we're reviewing today about bands who get back together for the money?
Oh yeah, I'm sure they're really raking in the cash.
Punk favorite, the Lawrence Arms.
Yeah.
Who, like, 3, I don't know how many of us, like, a majority of us didn't know who they were.
And I only knew who they were
legend.
because of Morgan.
We'll save that for our review.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and full disclosure, I love the Lawrence Arms. I think their trilogy of albums consisting of Apathy and Exhaustion, The Greatest Story Ever Told, and O Calcutta are essential listens. What?
I really want to make a joke about the album title Apathy and Exhaustion.
Well,
We'll get to that.
it's a more
Also
fitting,
back.
it's a more fitting name for this record that we're covering today.
Morgan, I
so-
certainly trust your opinion on those earlier records. I'm sure they're probably much better than what we.
I can back him up. O Calcutta's a great record. Please do not let later era turn you off of this band, because it shouldn't.
And finally, I have listened to 4 Tom Waits albums now. I'm going in
Holy
order
shit.
of release.
My
I'll
influence.
just synchronize those into one statement, is that they're good except for Foreign Affairs, which made me take a nap.
Yep. How about that Bette Midler duet, though?
It's still
Yeah,
not a bad album. It's just a mid album.
I agree with that. It's just it's
The hardest of fives.
Tom was
It's-
really searching in the late 70s. He was really trying to find where he was going to go, and he didn't really find it until Swordfish Trombones.
Yeah, that's my worst to best of that is recorded, and it's going to come out soon. But
Is it
a
recorded?
theme you will discover. Yeah, you will discover that the bad thing about Tom Waits' 70s run is that trying to distinguish the albums from one another is a Herculean task if you put it all in perspective.
I will say just really briefly that I had a quick revisit of my revisit of Small Change, and I think that album is a bit underrated. I do like that album more than the first couple times I heard it. It's grown on me. There's some good songs on there.
Well, and it's only underrated by me and Jake.
No, yeah, it's on Sputnik Music. It's got a 4.1, which is crazy.
And
Anyway,
it's a very good album. It's
I
just
digress.
not it's Closing Time or Heart of Saturday. Anyway, that's all from me.
first shot.
Oh, hello. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So I'm going to turn to hello.
Yeah, mate.
Right. So, I'm gonna
What's happening?
I'm gonna start by working in a way in which I can cheat, because literally an hour before we started recording, I had some vinyls come in the post, and I'm just gonna show them off.
Were they black metal finals?
Jesus
No!
fucking Christ.
Ironically, I've been
No faith in
working.
that. See.
Ironically, I have been working to have Sunbather for so long,
Yeah.
and it got lost in the post.
The
Me with
reason
Henry's dream.
I had no faith in that is because I realized only 2 of you would get it. So
Yeah.
I got it. It's funny. Anyway, the first one is this: Some Rap Songs by Earl Sweatshirt.
Perfect record.
I listened to this record recently, and I was just blown away by it. I'm yet to listen to it again so I can take it in and remember it, but I remember loving it. So
It's fantastic.
I got it. I also
Big
got
Rover
my
too.
favorite Brockhampton record, Iridescence, which comes in like beautiful clear vinyls. But this was all on the back of Jake's video because I realized I did not have enough hip hop records. Before this delivery, I had Just Atrocity Exhibition, which is shameful. So I got those two. I got Fear of a Black Planet, which hasn't arrived, and I got 2 jazz records, both of which I listened to this week. In a Silent Way by Miles
It's
Davis.
so beautiful seeing it close up in vinyl form.
I know. And I also
I
got.
just listened to a man come.
That was a beautiful. That was a beautiful moment.
And I also got Moanin' by Art Blakely, which I love. Yeah. So the actual 5. Me trying to talk about Ortega Records. Anyway.
That's good.
Thank you. But the actual 5 albums I want to talk about are, first of all, I was getting into the Phil back catalogue, so I listened to A Crow Looked at Me by Mount Eerie, which I'd heard years and years ago, but not gone back to. And as I said in my review on Music Board, this album is very directly about grief, which I have directly experienced. But if you have ever experienced loss of any kind, you will resonate with this record. It is so universal, despite being so specific. And I think that's a towering achievement of writing. I've been listening to loads of Talking Heads this week. And the one I enjoyed the most was Talking Heads 77, which I just really enjoyed. It's such a fun... Sorry?
I was just going to say that's rare to hear that.
That's a bizarre. You said you listened to Remain in Light.
I did, which I enjoyed a lot, but I enjoyed Talking Heads.
And you like CNC more than Remain in Light. They're
both like top tier records for me, if that helps.
You also, I noticed, gave a far too low score to Fear of Music.
I like that record. It just feels like a transitionary record between the aesthetics of the early work and Remain in Light.
I think, have you... Stupid question. Forgive me if we've already talked about it, but it seems like obvious. But have you seen / heard Stop Making Sense?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure, because I lose track of which of my friends have seen my favorite movie of all time. So...
it's a great movie.
Yeah, I recommend, like...
Do you consider Halon's Razor?
After you've done those first 5 studio records, I recommend going back to the album and just listening to the Stop Making Sense album again.
I probably will.
Because
I mean, I went back and listened to one of the songs from Fear of Music that I remember loving so much and Stop Making Sense, but I can't remember what it is. But I thought it was...
Time?
Yeah, that'll be it, yeah. I thought it was just loads better on Stop Making Sense.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to say, pretty much every song on Stop Making Sense is better than the album version.
I mean, that's fair. I would beg to differ sorry, just specifically on Fear of Music, or...
Well, no, every song that they perform on Stop Making Sense, they do better than the album.
I agree, except for Psycho Killer, which is a fine, widgety interpretation. But
it's very much a stripped back one on the.
It serves more of a narrative purpose for its being the way it is on Stop Making Sense than it is on the album. I also 100%. Prefer the album cut of that, but they're going for very different things.
I also want to acknowledge that there are some people out there who prefer the name of this band is Talking Heads to Stop Making Sense, 2 live albums. There are some people out there who say the name of this band is Talking Heads is better than Stop Making Sense, and those people are wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong.
No, it's not a W, Tyler. It's a big L.
Well, fucking, which way do L's go? It's this way.
2 L's makes a U for you need to stop.
I also listened to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West.
The spit from that laugh, I felt it in my ear. It transferred across continents.
I also listened to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West, which is my 5th or 6th Kanye record. Considering
Yay.
my first was Jesus is King, I think it's pretty good.
More like mild, beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy.
You're not wrong.
True.
But considering I haven't heard his Graduation Bear trilogy, it's probably my favorite I've heard from him. I still gave it a 7. The thing is, it has some of the best moments I've ever heard from Kanye. Absolutely, some of them, and half of them are from other people, but that's a different question. The way Nicki Minaj raps on this album is better than anything Kanye does, rapping wise on the record. His production is still really solid.
Yeah. For me, it's like how when I listen to some Miles Davis records, I'm far more impressed by Wayne Shorter or Tony Williams than I am by actually Miles himself. But that's not a disservice to the album or to Miles, because Miles is the reason that they're there doing
absolutely. Yeah, Kanye did with a lot of the songs on this record what like DJ Khaled thinks he is. But it's like 10%, maybe 5 of. In terms of
y'all think Kanye eats pussy?
Absolutely not. Next question.
And just in terms of seeing talent and knowing what to do with it, that's what DJ Khaled thinks he does, but Kanye actually does it. You know.
Oh yeah, you know what? Kanye owes so much to DJ Khaled. The more I think about it.
Excuse me?
It was a shit post.
Okay, good. You can live. Anyway, I enjoyed it a lot. I think it is some of Kanye's best production I've heard so far, considering I haven't heard his most critically celebrated records.
No, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is certainly his most critically celebrated.
I would say it's the most critically celebrated of what I've heard, but I know loads.
No, in general, absolutely is. Like, it is universally very popular to consider that the best hip-hop album of the last decade.
Which is weird, because like half of it's boring.
Probably as beloved, honestly.
Actually, no, it's not half it's boring. Like 35% is boring, and like 40% is brilliant. So overall mixed feelings. Listen to Holy Ghost by Modern Baseball, Saoirse Core record.
Good album. Good album.
Christ, the transition between Holy Ghost and Wedding Singer is just some of the best like Midwestern emo out there. Outside of the hotelier, really. And I also listened to Drinking Songs by Matt Elliott, which is another like old school Saoirse Core record that I haven't listened to for years. And I went back to it and I just forgot how weird it is.
It has like a drum and bass section.
Yeah. Towards the end, it goes into like electronica percussion places.
It's amazing. It works.
Yeah.
Is the main thing to get across.
Mm-hmm. The fact that it starts out as like late career Tom Waits and then moves into like folk and then moves into ambient and then anti-folk and then electronica and it all feels like a universal voice is just astonishing to me. And it also fits the title of Drinking Songs wonderfully. Here, I am done.
Yeah, beautiful.
It's like Tyler's been drinking from the album cover of I Can Hear the Heart Beating as One. Like with the red label and the liquid. It looks like you've been drinking that liquified.
Yeah,
I would drink that album liquefied.
Where's all the rum? Where's all the rum going? It's all gone.
Okay, so I will try and cycle through the highlights of my week because I've listened to a lot of music this week. I'm going to just zip through as much as I can really quickly. I listened to Rush's Power Windows, which is now my third favorite Rush album. It's amazing. It's underrated. It's fucking near perfect. Holy shit, is it good? I was like, I was not expecting this level of great from this album, but it's amazing. It's right up there with their best. So good. Power Windows is just pure Rush at their best. And I might even venture to say that I like their new wave period a little better than their 70s classic prog period.
Very Tyler take, but I'm okay with it because that's
it
a
is
good
very
fucking
Tyler
take.
But I don't want to create the impression that I think, their 70s prog stuff is not great. It is amazing. But yeah, woo, definitely. I also listened to Opeth's Still Life. Yeah. So that's an album. So I've been doing the Opeth.
You've been doing the Opeth
for a while.
I have been fucking Mikael Ackerfeld.
No, just like give me some of that powdered Opeth. Come on, let's...
I could just freebase it.
First two Opeth albums, Orchid, Morning Rise, good, fine, not great, little underwhelmed. Third album, My Arms, Your Hearse, fantastic, exactly what I wanted from them. A little front-loaded maybe, but still like not a major noticeable way, just kind of the more I reflected on it.
Helps on re-listen too.
But Still Life is just perfection from start to finish. It's
yes!
I could possibly want from an album of this kind of sound and style. The concept is heart-wrenching. It grabs you. It's incredibly well written. The story just grabs you and pulls you in immediately, and you're just kind of like on tenterhooks from track to track, wanting to see like what's going to happen. Not even necessarily caught up in the details of the story as much as in how compelling the presentation is. The writing is so good. It's so moving. It feels like finally all of the different little instrumental styles and like the acoustic stuff and the full-on metal and the different vocal stylings, they're all kind of coming together and they're all on display here in really fascinating ways. It's just a perfect album.
Face of Melinda might be the most beautiful track they've ever made. Like, full stop.
Look, it's up there, honestly, so far. So I'm really excited now.
Still Life Praise makes me so happy.
Yeah, it's a shame because it doesn't go down by much for a long time, but it's all downhill from here.
Well, I don't even care because I have this album.
Yep,
and I can
it's that
come
good.
back to it. So that was a big highlight of my week. I also listened to so I'm zipping through Tom Waits now. I've heard a lot of the big ones, but I'm doing all of them now, the ones I have heard and the ones I haven't heard. So I listened to Frank's Wild Years, the conclusion of the kind of unofficial trilogy of Swordfish, Rain Dogs, and this album. And holy shit, this album's fucking awesome! Like, it's so good! And I never hear anyone talking about it. And it's amazing! And it has the theme song from The Wire on it.
Yeah, right?
It's so good. Like, it's not even a step down. Like, obviously it's not as great as Rain Dogs, which the more I reflect on it might be my favorite Tom Waits album, although I have to get through all the ones I haven't heard yet. But you know what? Frank's Wild Years, people be
Did you say favorite Tom Waits record?
People are sleeping on it. And it's a
not true.
I also want to shout out so I'm doing kind of listening to more and more jazz, including revisiting a lot of the jazz favorites I heard when I was first getting into music, now that I have a little bit more knowledge about jazz. And so I listened to, this was the first listen actually, but I listened to Mingus's Blues and Roots, which is just the wildest party you'll ever hear on record. Like, from the first second of this album, it's like you've walked into a fucking herd of elephants. Like, and it's not like avant-garde either. It's very, very like easy to listen to. Like, it's just a party. You walk into a party, they're all having a great time. There's like blues screaming in the background. It's just amazing. It's called Blues and Roots, but it's not blues in the sad sense. It's blues in the sense of swinging and having fun and getting drunk and just having an amazing time. And it's a near perfect album. I also revisited Mingus's famous The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady as well, which is heavenly.
I need gifts.
Has ever gotten. Also, I re-listened to 3 jazz albums this week that are all like contenders for the best thing I've ever heard. And I know I say that about a lot of things, but holy crap. So Black Saint and the Sinner Lady, In a Silent Way, and Bitches Brew I listened to last night again for the first time in years. And you just can't, I can't even express how great these albums are. They're just, like, they deserve all the classic status they have. And, like, getting into jazz, spending all the time it takes to really kind of understand how jazz works and what, you know, is so special about it is so worth it when you get to albums like this and you listen to them and you actually, like, appreciate everything that's going on and it all just clicks and it's really, really special. So
I still haven't listened to Bitches Brew for that reason. I just want to. I feel like that is the zenith, and I want to build up to that as much as I can.
Oh yeah, like,
so to speak.
Yeah, it's totally like
yeah.
It's basically like In a Silent Way if it were in a loud way. It's very much building on the future.
Good one.
I know that
I'm just so happy. I'm so happy I own it. I'm just so happy.
It's beautiful.
It's my child.
In
I
a
love
Silent
it.
Way is like basic pick, but it is my favorite Miles record that I've heard.
Yeah.
I've still got to get into some of his 70s stuff. Anyway, other things I want to shout out that I listened to. Yes, another great jazz album I listened to, really great, near perfect, is Herbie Hancock's Empyrean Isles. Amazing. Hancock, I listened to Hancock because I was getting into the fusion stuff of Miles again, and Herbie Hancock obviously played a big role in that instrumentally, so I wanted to go and really dig into his solo stuff, and I'm going to keep doing that. But I went back to the pre-fusion Hancock, so this is like 1963, and this is an amazing album, like just balls to the wall, fun, but also like really experimental in ways that I would have never expected even for 63 from someone like Hancock. Like there's a 14-minute piece here called The Egg, which is basically like takes you to hell and back in 14 minutes. It's just an absolute fucking journey. And that album is really short as well. It's only like 35 minutes, the album. And I would highly recommend it, even if you're new to jazz out there. It's a great, because it's quite friendly, but also experimental in lots of ways as well. It's a great record. I also listened to Prefab Sprouts, I Trawl the Megahertz, which is a Prefab Sprout, I think this British kind of art pop band from the 80s. I haven't heard any of the other stuff, but in the 2000s, their leader, Paddy McAloon, I think his name is, he was gradually going blind, and he made this sort of basically on his own, and then it got reissued under the Prefab Sprout name. And basically what it is it's basically, the way I summed it up is it's like, God, what did I say? It's like Philip Glass scoring an unmade Charlie Kaufman movie. And
Dear
it's
God.
basically all you need to know. Like it's a beautiful, it's like lush strings, like it's a string driven record all the way through. And it's basically this concept record about you know, the impermanence of memories and fading time and all that kind of stuff. And it's just incredible. Would recommend. Particularly the 20-minute title track, which is just one of the best songs in the world. Straight up. In fact, the album, if the album has one weakness, it's that after you get through the 20-minute title track, nothing else is as good as that remotely, but it's still very good. Another jazz album I want to shout out, I listened to Coltrane's Sonship, which is an album Coltrane recorded in 65, I think, around the time of The Love Supreme, but didn't get released until after he was dead. But it's a brilliant slept-on release. There's so many great Coltrane releases. Like you really can't, if you just pick up or scroll on your streaming service and pick a Coltrane at random, you're gonna listen to something amazing. Basically, it's almost guaranteed. And Sonship is a beautiful record that I want to shout out because it doesn't get as much hype and recognition as his other albums. In fact, a lot of his posthumous records, I think, are like that. But it's fantastic, and it's like from that Love Supreme era. So it's like he's at the top of his game. Compositionally and in terms of the playing, it's wild, but at the same time, there's that sense of tethered focus that Love Supreme has that he kind of sort of disregards a little bit after that in the last couple of years of his life, which is fine. Like the real free jazz stuff like Ascension and all that afterwards is great too in its own way, but that really focused fusion of the noisier playing that he does and that structure that's a little more conventional is on display here. So great album. And yeah, I also re-listened to Tom Waits' Bone Machine, but what is there to say about Bone Machine that hasn't already been said? It's amazing.
And I'm going to say we should get moving into the main event now.
Let's
'cause
do
it's
it.
been like
Let's
45 minutes.
I just want to add a note to the Coltrane thing, which is
Yeah, please.
there's coming up, I think it's the 60th, I'm not sure. There's an anniversary re-release of Giant Steps coming out, which I have pre-ordered, but it's not coming out until I think October. But look out for it because it is lush and it's a great record. And when that drops, it is going to be my B-side, not my B-side, it's my recommended album club choice.
Yeah.
So get ready.
Giant Steps is just like one of the best jazz albums ever.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We're
And it's
covering
being
2
re-released.
Coltrane records. Yeah.
I don't even know if I would put Giant Steps in my top 3 Coltrane, which is saying a lot about how fucking many great records he has. But it is a perfect album, in my opinion. All right, you're right. August is right. Let's continue. Let's move on and talk about our new releases for this week. And I believe first up on the docket is Mircophones.
It is the first one. Well done.
Yes. So I have a very long sort of screed about this album, but I don't know whether I should go first or not. So
Introduce it.
I'll introduce it. So, I mean, if you're listening, you probably already know the context of this record because it's very popular at the moment. So basically, Phil Elverum has been releasing music for the past 25 years under various monikers. Since 2005, I believe, he's been using the name Mount Erie and has released more than a dozen albums and other releases under that name. But before 2005, in his early days, he used the name The Mircophones, and that was a period during which he released probably his most acclaimed and significant record, which is The Glow Part 2 in 2001. And so, but since 2003's Mount Erie, he has not released anything under the Mircophones, any albums under the Mircophones name. And that has changed with this new release, Mircophones in 2020, where he is returning to that.
You don't say.
To that name, yeah, and it's very much you can see when you listen to it immediately why why he's returned to that name. It's very much a reflection on that period of his life when he was recording music under the Mircophones and growing up as well, because that was in his early 20s. So. Yeah, I have a lot to say about this record, and so if you're a fan, then please stick around for my review. I don't think I'll go first, though, because my review is pretty long-winded. But yeah, I have a lot to say about this, and I'm very much unsure how pretty much anyone else here is going to feel about this record. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some skepticism towards it. It is very much, I guess, in a lot of ways, if you want to be ungenerous, it's very much kind of like an ego project. But I mean, so are a lot of singer-songwriter releases. You know, it's very much like it has a very strong meta element to it that you get from a lot of artists who have kind of storied bodies of work. But that said, I am curious to hear what everyone here makes of it, and specifically, how the experience has been for you all with this strange and unconventional release.
My review is quite short, so I'd be very happy to go first.
Go for it.
So, in prep, I listened to 2 Mircophones records. I listened to The Glow Part 2, and It Was Hot, So We Stayed In. This is my favourite Mircophones record, I think. In a way, it's more like a Philip solo record that just... He's using the Mircophones name as a metatextual element, almost. Like, it's so...
Yeah. Well, of course, the thing to remember as well is that all of them are basically, like, he works with collaborators, but he has no real consistent band.
No, I understand. But my point is more like, this is less like a return to the style of the Mircophones, and more like an album that calls itself by the microphones as an element of commenting on itself.
Yeah. One interesting little thing I want to bring up here is that Phil has actually said in a press release, he said that it felt weird to be calling this an album, and that to him it feels more like an audio book. Which I think
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely. Like, that's the thing that we haven't mentioned yet, is this is one song that is 44 minutes long. The Caretaker, Eat Your Heart Out. No, I mean, in a way, it almost reminds me more of Mount Eerie music I've heard. It really reminds me of A Crow Looked at Me in its blatant honesty, almost awkward frankness, and autobiography. And the way in which Phil autobiographizes himself is very similar to that album as well. I think if you were to break this up into movements, it could almost be a companion piece about 2 points in his life. And this album, at points, does invoke similar ideas of loss, even though it takes place at a point earlier in his life. To approach this album as sort of anything other than an autobiography of like 5 years in Phil's life, it is a mistake, I think. Like, and I know that I always say that I just want to talk about the music and not the artist, but that is very impossible with this album. And if you want to be on the same level as this piece of music, which I think you should try to be with any piece of music, you have to appreciate it like that. It is also worth mentioning, it is 7 minutes and 40 seconds until the first line, and the other 7 minutes and 40 seconds are the same two guitar chords alternating between each other. This is a moody and atmospheric record that places much more stock on tone complementing lyrical subject matter than anything else. The way in which Phil conjures mood is deeply impressive, with what appears to be a pretty stripped back instrumentation at the beginning, although it does at points move into much louder, more distorted, almost aggressive sounds. It slowly gets noisier and more textured and more layered, even though those first 7.5 minutes are really stripped back. After it reaches a crescendo somewhere in the middle, it's almost like a bell curve in terms of the level of tone, because afterwards it goes back into more moody places, but also more elegiac places, more sonically beautiful moments. Whereas the first half is almost like a gradual, musically at least, I'm not talking about the lyrics, musically it's like a descent into sonic darkness. The second half is much more like traveling through like Elysian fields in terms of the tone of the music. Lots of more expansive sonic palettes, and it just, through all of this, the lyrics are doing their own work that often complement, often match, but equally as often juxtapose the musical palette of the music. It is a story told beautifully. I hesitate to love the record because it is just a bit of a task at points. Like, whenever I've listened to this album, there are I heard someone say of theatre where it's like, as good as a play can be, there's a point where you're wondering what you're going to cook for dinner afterwards. And I feel similarly about this record, where I think it's really good, but it needs big caveats in capital letters before you recommend it.
Yeah, that's why I was really surprised when it got the initial surge of love that it got, and I was very nervous about that, because when you get any kind of surge of love with a new release, the backlash is not a question of if, it's a question of when, and people tend to kind of not. I'm not trying to suggest that you can't criticize a record for requiring context, Not that I think even this necessarily requires context, although it certainly benefits from it. And I'm not trying to suggest that you can't criticize a record for requiring context. Sure, if that's an important thing to you, then that a record shouldn't have to have that to be enjoyable, that's fair. But very much when this got this initial wave of hype, there was very much a lot of people saying, oh, okay, I've never heard of this guy. I guess I'll check this out because everyone's going crazy about it. And it's just like I was saying, no, this is not where you should begin because it's very purposefully a reflection on a past musically and personally. And I think you can really get on board with that when you have that context. And I don't know, maybe I would be very curious what the experience would be like for someone for whom this was the first Mircophones record. But yeah, it's definitely, I guess in a lot of ways, it kind of, maybe it should have been like Phil album rather than the Mircophones. But at the same time, like the Mircophones itself does feel...
That's my position.
It
where,
does feel so integral
at the beginning,
it's chasing.
This feels more like an album by Phil. But you kind of have to, even the song itself lyrically acknowledges this has to be a record by the Mircophones, even if it's very sonically different.
Because it has to be a part of the Mircophones story. Like,
absolutely.
It can't be disentangled from that, and the story can't end the way that before this came out. It did end because this is now intangibly linked to that. And anyway, I digress.
Yeah, but no, what you're saying is wonderfully complimenting what I'm saying, so thank you. But no, it's got some very amazing lyrics. There's a line, "You keep dying and the sun keeps rising," that just ripped my heart into shreds. And that's like not even partway through the song.
It's like the first line, I think.
Yeah, that's the opening lyrical passage.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of it. The first lyric is the true state of all things.
Yeah, August is right. But I wrote that down because it just so reminded me of The Tone of a Crow Looked at Me, which is my favorite album that Phil has made.
And just on the note of the lyricism as well, you had mentioned that that the lyricism often complements the sonic qualities of the music as well. And I want to mention too, I know I've recommended to a bunch of people that you check out the music video, and not because I think that the experience of the album is inextricably linked to the music video or that you wouldn't be able to enjoy it without it, but just because I think the music video, independent of the album itself, adds another meta layer to it, because as Phil is recounting these experiences, he's showing photographs of the place that he was at, or the thing that was happening, or if not directly, then at least something that represents the emotional historical state, because they're all photographs from his life. This meta aspect that's inherent in the actual album itself is expanded on in a really interesting way in the music video, I think, which maybe makes the record a little bit easier to swallow when you have that additional feedback and that additional content on top of the record itself.
But no, in a way, the reason I keep bringing up A Crow Looked to Me is because almost what this album does is it ties the themes of that record to the backstory of the artist. And it is like a meeting of that record and every record before that in a way that makes everything he did in that period, which is a long period, make way more sense. And, you know, I'm not saying it didn't make sense before, but it just contextualizes it as part of a story that, like, it's almost like a multimedia experiment, but every piece of media is just a different album. It's just such a bold step, but one that doesn't come out of a place of thinking, wouldn't it be fucking whack if I wrote a 44-minute autobiographical song and released it as an album? It comes out of a place of, this is something I needed to say. And this is the ultimate and best expression of that thing I needed to say. It reminded me lots of How to Disappear completely by Radiohead. It is beautifully immersive. And the way, also just sonically, the way in which the guitars are panned between different ears is fucking masterstroke. It's subtle but pervasive and genius. It sounds amazing. The way in which there's a guitar in each ear that does a hard downstroke at different points just fucks with your head, and it's so immersive and beautiful. And I'm not going to give this a 10. I don't think it's a perfect record, but it's really good. And I want to recommend it to anyone who is sort of willing to hear a record like this.
Totally. Yeah. Cosign.
Well, my review is also rather short. So if anyone is in opposition, I can
Go ahead,
for it.
wait.
Go for it, Morgan.
Go.
Alrighty. So this is my first Phil Elverum.
Elverum.
Thank you, Elverum, the fucking guy. You know the one.
Elder, Mistress of Darkness.
Good one. This is my first of his
I was gonna
records.
make the same joke.
Oh, cool.
I
So
was
there is someone here who it is the first for.
I started A Crow Looked at Me because it was getting all sorts of critical hype back when it released, and I was like, nope, this is deeply uncomfortable. So yeah, this is officially my first Phil Elverum record, despite being familiar with who he is and the place he holds in the musical canon. So that said, it is worth noting that a fair amount of the effect of this record was lost on me. This is a terrible comparison, but it kind of feels like starting Star Wars at The Force Awakens. Like, you can kind of enjoy what's going on a cursory glance, but like, if you haven't seen the 6 movies before that, you're kind of just gonna be like, okay, this is a thing that's happening. That said, the album, I think, the sound of it sonically is gorgeous. And I definitely enjoyed listening to it. The only thing that I would dock against it is the fact that the opening melody is 2 chords and it goes on for 8 fucking minutes. And like, it's a great melody. It's beautiful, but it's also the length of Master of Puppets by Metallica. Which is like, I get it. The atmosphere is set. You could have done this in 3 minutes. You did do this in 3 minutes, and instead you decided to keep going.
I was going to say, put a pin in this because I'm going to make a case for that opening 8 minutes.
I already know what your case is because you're you.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, I already know that you're going to make a fucking case for the 8 minutes and make me look like a stupid, but it's also 8 minutes long, and I got bored. Once the lyrics start, I'm like, this is such an interesting reflection on life and the passage of time that I am really just not getting the full impact of because I have not done my homework, which is, I would have. But as you can see by the what we've listened to section, I am working through a lot of music right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't necessarily have time to dive into this dude's 15 albums or whatever it is in total. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I probably will not return to it until I get to the whatever, whenever I get to getting through the Mircophones and Mount Erie's back catalog.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all I would say is definitely I recommend checking those records out because they're much more like, you can get into them. You don't require like the context as much. But if you don't like vibe with Phil after those records, or it's not like something you're really like passionately engaged in, then I wouldn't bother like necessarily returning to this.
Word.
Yeah, but those other records definitely.
You're chewing.
Food, dumbass.
Well, duh, but what?
Why do you care?
It's
It's distracting. Minorly.
August, what did you think of the album?
It's a mint.
Oh, what did I think? Uh,
I thought it sucked balls.
well, I'm going to start
It was
out with
mid.
2020 has obviously been a very turbulent year, to say the very least.
Oh boy.
And this has been a year full of highs, lows, and societal isolation. And I've spent many months this year just kind of sitting in a Nebraska basement, just kind of thinking about all sorts of whatever crossed my mind in a particular day. Sometimes even thinking about how the world got here. How did I end up in this position? And earlier on this podcast, Morgan described the Jason Isbell record from this year, I believe it was, as a record that felt to perfectly encapsulate the moment he was living in at this current point. It might have been
That was Run the Jewels.
Yeah.
Run the Jewels, okay. Very well, but Run the Jewels he had described that way. And that was this album for me, because this whole year I've been pondering, just trying to make a map back to this current point in my life. That's right, you all got punked. I fucking love this album.
I didn't fall for it.
I
had that fucking in the back of my head. I was just like, he's gonna say he had trouble getting through it because it was emotionally resonant with him. That motherfucker, I know he's gonna do it.
Yeah, he said he was gonna suffer through it, and I was like, August would never let that kind of thing slip if he was actually opposed to an album. I'm way ahead of you. You're gonna have to wake up pretty early to slip one past me, Chief.
All right. Well, first there's, of course, the opening 8-minute kind of 2 guitar chords, which some people, particularly Morgan, have bemoaned the length of. Whereas myself, I find it to be just, it for me kind of, that length of time makes the moment when the vocals first kick in all that more impactful. Because as Phil has lulled you into this sense of security throughout that time, you kind of come to just almost question if this is going to go into this lyrical direction. And it's almost like a moment on the Glow Part 2 on the song Samurai Sword, I believe, where Phil just jumps out and can kind of scare you with just how heavy that song gets in contrast to the rest of the record.
No,
But
just
this is
imagine
like...
Phil Elverum jumping out of the bushes.
but
Surprise, motherfucker!
but this is like not him scaring you, but this is like you walking through a dense forest and you just so happen to run into someone you know who, and I think knowing Phil Elverum contextually can definitely make or break this record. I would not have any issue if someone said it just washed over them because they've never heard another album by him, which fortunately I have. And I find that the story the ultimate metaphor he's making here is life being a giant, endless waterfall. Another band who made that metaphor is System of a Down, but I digress. But
Serge Tankian and Phil Elverum collab album win.
August, I'd love to be your English teacher, like marking your essays and thinking, who the fuck is System of a Down and the Mars Volta? What does this have to do with the book?
The story of Septimus Smith and Mrs. Dalloway was very evocative of Francis the Mute by the Mars Volta.
I had high school teachers who were fans of Brand New. We've gotten to the point where the kids who were listening to the Mars Volta have, become
I had the
adults.
same teacher he's referring to, and that was very weird.
but to continue on, this this metaphor of water, I feel perfectly kind of embodies the album's structure, being a free-flowing narrative which takes us throughout many points in time in Phil Elverum's life. For example, if you're watching the music video, this album starts in the year 2003. I say that because of the connection to Mount Erie made in this kind of demonstration, where the photographs show a ghostly silhouetted figure, similar to the protagonist on that album. And speaking of that album, I think if one were to love that album and have a problem with this album, I would be rather confused because I feel this could be an album that could have been cut up into various songs that all flow together. It is just presented to us in this one grander package of an album. But this free-flowingness that pervades throughout the album lets Phil just kind of go wherever he wants in time and give us just beautiful portraits of moments, sometimes down to like the exact date, March 18th, 2001, that he saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And then there are times where he'll just give you like a general year, like 2002 being the time he moved past the point in his life where he felt the Mircophones label was befitting of the music he was creating. And what I love about that is it just has it kind of gives this beautiful specificity and yet generality to this record, this great kind of juxtaposition, something that Saoirse's mentioned, which makes this album so great, that it is able to juxtapose instrumentals with vocals, instrumentals with other instrumentals, and I feel also vocals with other vocals. Just these, yeah. Going on further, I mean, yeah, Saoirse's taken a couple of my points about how this album serves to make every instrumental feel very purposeful, which is something I've always adored about Phil's music, that every instrumental choice he does feels like it ties into the song. It feels very planned out. And yet there's a sporadicness to this album, particularly throughout that backing 2-chord harmony, where you'll hear like different guitar strings being plucked occasionally. So even in this purpose, there is randomness and disorder. It is, yeah. Christ, what? I feel I could talk about this album for just hours and how every part of it feels like it needed to be there, but yet it feels equally disposable in just such a beautiful way. And I don't know, I adored the way this kind of just brings everything together about the Mircophones, like calling back to the taking my shirt off in the yard line.
Oh, that moment.
Yeah.
That moment.
It's still off. Which dopey sounding line if you've never heard another Mircophones album. Hard hitting if you have heard Glow Part 2.
If you've heard the Glow Part 2 even once, then you remember that moment when he sings, I took my shirt off in the yard.
But yeah, it's just this grand, embarrassing reflection on nostalgia, just something that is so beautiful, and I feel has just perfectly captured this time of great self-reflection and compassion and empathy we are forced to live in the current year.
This is going to be an August new release 10 out of 10. I thought it would take us years to get to that.
I will say one thing remarkable about this album is that it's the first album I've ever heard that makes reference to both the Cranberries and the black metal band Mayhem.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, that moment is so beautiful. That like moment where he's singing along with the lyrics and the
Yep.
guitar plucking's just going with his voice, and it's like mwah, mwah, mwah.
Yeah, Phil's a big black metal fan. But yeah.
I could
What
have
is
told
he
you that
mentions
just
a
from listening to this.
concert. Does he mention like a Stereo Lab concert? Is that what it
He
was?
does.
Yeah, well,
Fury Lab concert.
No,
Yeah.
knowing that Phil is a black metal fan is like knowing that John Donneill's favorite genre is metal. Like,
Or that Frank Turner is also in a post-hardcore band.
yeah.
It's not that surprising when you've heard like Wind's Poem or Ocean Roar.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently his black metal record. Anyway, Jake, you have not spoken.
Yeah, I think I occupy a weird middle space here just because I am familiar enough with, like, I'm probably more familiar than everybody here sans Tyler, just because I've heard lots of, like, I've heard almost every Mircophones album and, like, 2/3 of Mount Erie stuff. And I love, like, pretty much all of it that I've heard. And so I was kind of skeptical going into this because, like, Tyler, you know, it's got acclaim, you know, and also this is a 44-minute long song, and, you know, just with the context of everything happening, you go into something like this and you're just like, there's a lot of variables that can go wrong here. And I think it's worth saying out of the gate that Phil should be commended for, like, as everybody said, this is a very, I think it can be appreciated on its own, but to get everything that can be gotten out of a piece of art, context helps. And with a context, or with a record that is so reliant on context to get the full appreciation of what you're going for, you very much run the risk of making music that can be labeled pretentious or whatever. And I think it is we should compliment Phil on the fact that he's, at least so far, mostly avoided this criticism for the most part. And I think that a lot of points that have been made so far have been made specifically by August and Saoirse. I will say I will compliment what August had to say, and that I think the lyric that unlocks this album is that he mentions that, like, life and just everything, it's like a waterfall with no end. And I very much feel that album is a reflection of that. It is a void under which, like, the laws of causality, they aren't real. This is just a formless, shapeless thing that exists, and I feel in a way it congeals his entire career together, because the best thing that this album does for me, it's not that it requires the other records in his discography to be fully appreciated. It's the fact that when I finished this album, I walked away with a greater appreciation for those records. I viewed his career in, like, a completely new light as to why he even makes music, as to why he makes music about the things that he makes music about, specifically with his connection to nature and the world, and how Phil has always kind of, to me anyway, come across as somebody who has a deep spiritual connection to the world, but a very difficult connection with people, like a distance with people. And that's part of why A Crow Looked at Me.
Energy, like me.
Yeah. It's like why A Crow Looked at Me hits so hard. It's because I feel like that is the first, like, intensely interpersonal album that he's really made. And in a way, I think this album, very on brand of me, is comparable to a one Miss Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher, in that I feel a instance in the protagonist and the artist's life has dislodged them from time. And this album is a result of that dislodgement and sort of a fourth dimensional godlike view of specific moments that they want to capture that are integral to understanding not what like led them to there, just what led them to be who they are specifically. And since I walked away with a greater understanding of Phil's body of work, I feel that it's a resounding success. I feel that there's a point in this album, I feel, Saoirse mentioned it's sort of like a bell curve. I'd honestly compare it more closely to a traditional 3-act structure, because I think the peak, I think the climax sort of happens like almost exactly 2/3 in, a little past that, because there's a point where the instrumental just blossoms into this brief yet euphoric passage that it feels like everything's been built up to. And of a minor criticism, I will say, of someone who's appreciating and does genuinely love this record, I empathize with Morgan's criticism about the opening 8 minutes. As someone who also watched it with the video, I did that as well. That does help because you have a visual accompaniment to sort of stimulate yourself. And I feel like every time I listen to this record, I sort of tilted on the opening 8 minutes being so long and so simple. Is that on one hand, on one listen, I was just like, this is very meditative. It's sort of like eliminating all of the clouded thoughts of my brain and sort of just clearing the view so that I can take all of this in, because it's a very emotionally turbulent record if you're really paying close attention to it. Which it requires like permanent engagement. I think that more so than ever, Phil's lyricism and songwriting is front and center in a way that it only has been on records like A Crow Looked at Me, where like this is not a put in the background album. This is not a do something while you're working album. If you want to appreciate this, even without his other albums, you have to listen carefully. You have to meet this halfway. Not a criticism. You should probably engage most music like that. But
like,
that said,
in my notes, I have the line, this is an album you need to listen to with both headphones on.
110% that, just because also it's immaculately produced. I think that the album, like, even though Phil is no stranger to very lo-fi aesthetics, this does not lose the touch of the personal aspect of his music, but it also just sounds so pretty. There's not a single point of this album that doesn't feel good to take in.
Mm-hmm.
And as it's happening, I think it's integral that Phil focused on specifically the point in his life, mostly from ages 17 to 22, just because, at least for me, I feel like that is the most important part in my life so far. As someone who is 22, I feel like I have done the most growth and undergone the most change in those 5 years. So I am at a place in my life where I am perfectly geared to understand and reflect on that in tandem with Phil. And I'd also like to maybe suggest that's why August was particularly receptive, as I am at the end of this particular period, whereas August is at the beginning. And
as someone who was also 22, I concur. At the same time, the way you talk about this record and time and age, my God, read Slaughterhouse 5. Because everything you're saying about it is in that book.
We discussed this on the Phoebe Bridgers episode. I do need to do this. But this period, especially for artists, I think is very important as well, because it's sort of the period where, like, I get the impression from Phil's lyrics, if I can sort of dive a little bit more personally into them from his perspective, Phil seems to view his early music as a product of struggle. Like, he was trying to make something and he was doing it in whatever form that he could. And as somebody who has done exactly that, I empathize with that very, very deeply. And I feel to an extent he sort of grew. And once he got to something like once he reached his sort of peak, it feels like his progression to Mount Erie was the moving on point for him. That's the sort of climax of him learning that, like, I can move forward past this. But this period as a growing point for him personally it feels really, really earned. You sort of go with him on this journey. He talks about being on tour a lot. He talks about hanging out with people and his friends and what they would do and during concerts. And it's very vivid in a way. I mean, it's quite cinematic, even when you're not watching the video. Like, I was kind of stunned when I did watch the video of how much of the pictures that he took evoked things that I had already, like, everything I had imagined looked almost identical. So I think that's a testament to his songwriting skill. But I think that, I will say, viewing this after A Crow Looked at Me and Now Only, I feel hits harder, just because it is the most holistic portrait of a man through his art as one is capable of getting without, like, literally reading a detailed, in-depth autobiography. And he avoids that comparison really just because he's a phenomenal lyricist. He's very upfront, kind of clumsy, kind of awkward sometimes, but in a way that feels Charlie Kaufman-ish, in that the intentional awkwardness and clumsiness reflects a genuine, soft humanity, but also in the fact that he's a legitimately talented poet with moments that will absolutely rip your heart out. And it makes the journey very, very, very satisfying, even if I also agree with Saoirse's points to an extent of, like, I feel your appreciation, like, exists on a spectrum of where you can like this. And, you know, if you are not as familiar, you'll be sort of on, like, there's a window of quality here. You'll sort of be on the lesser end of maybe still enjoying it, maybe like Morgan. But the limitless potential this has to affect you through the lens of other things is very important. The context, just the growth of him as a musician, sonically as well as narratively, all of these things are very, very important and integral to experiencing this. It's not like you got to listen to all of these records in order. I know I certainly didn't, and it still had a pretty profound emotional experience on me. It is a great album and a great statement, and in many ways one of Phil's most holistic experiences he's had recently. I'd still say Lost Wisdom Part 2 is the better record, but I don't want to demean this because they serve two distinct purposes and are interwoven in the same narrative. It's just that this album, it is great and wonderful and transcendent in all of the ways that have been mentioned by everybody here. But there's a massive fucking asterisk I gotta hit there that I gotta say that's just like, yes, you can enjoy this on itself. Morgan has proven that. But if you're someone who wants to get every drop of emotion and of value out of your art, you do owe it to yourself to listen to this in the context of the journey, which, again, it's a difficult thing to recommend to people because not everybody has the free time that we do. But that is how it is best experienced, and I would say that if I had to pick between the two, I would wait until you have that context to first listen to it rather than just going in blind, because you run the risk of not connecting with it as much.
Go sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have all, four of us, said quite a lot about this record, but I somehow suspect Tyler has more than all of us combined.
I don't know. Maybe not. Some of you have spoken at length about this, and that's fine. Like, my thoughts are quite. I wrote like a very stream of consciousness essay about this, so they're not very formed thoughts, but they're still written, so they should still hopefully be, legible. A couple of things though before I get into it. One thing I want to mention, just as an aside, is that I think the power in A Crow Looked at Me specifically, like what makes that record really, really devastating in context of his discography, is because like throughout Phil's work, this closeness with nature, like, as I think someone mentioned, like the feeling of being close to nature but perhaps more distant from people, this affinity that Phil has with nature and the natural world what makes Crow so devastating is that actual connection, that affinity with nature becomes poisoned in that record, because all of the aspects of the nature are only reflecting his grief, are only reflecting his loss. That's what I think the title means of that record. Like, a crow just staring at you, or a passing glance with some kind of aspect of nature that might once have been beautiful, but now is just intangibly, or you cannot separate from your grief.
And it's not just nature looking back at him, but it's also a very inherently gothic image.
Yeah.
Like, by the way, if you liked A Crow Looked at Me, please read Grief is the Thing with Feathers. It's like the same metaphor, but it's a book.
Beautiful. Yeah, so that was just an aside that I wanted to mention. So now I'll get to this record. And I also, as kind of an aside, I just want to shout out my favorite lyrical passage on this album. Just and it's, there's a few great lyrical passages, but I really like this one where he talks about the transition from the Mircophones to Mount Erie. And it's these lines: "With this imagined collective called the Mircophones, I wrote about climbing up and dying, and then flying off as vultures and a universe beyond, innocent of the real air of death that awaited down the path. At the very end of 2002, I took the Mircophones' name and crumpled it up and burned it in a cave on the frozen edge of northern Norway. I made a boundary between two eras of my life, a feeble gesture at making chaos seem organized." And I think it basically kind of encapsulates the kind of thing that Phil is getting at here, which is the stages of his life, and this notion of putting one era behind you, not knowing that what you're really doing is you're just stumbling towards the real era of death that's waiting for you. It's just such a devastating expression. Like, it's really heart-wrenching, and it really makes you think about the broader scope of the musical body that Phil has created, and the journey that he's been on through the music, or that he has shared through the music anyway. Anyway, Mircophones in 2020. I think this is a rare example of a record that benefits enormously from the understanding of the artist's life and musical history, as you've all kind of mentioned, but at the same time can be appreciated on its own merits as a standalone work of incredible personal intimacy and musicianship without the extra knowledge. It's kind of like reading someone's memoir. You're going to get a lot more out of the story if you're familiar with the period being covered, but at the same time, there's an emotional nakedness, though admittedly expressed poetically, that allows you to glean from it a vast number of insights about yourself and the experience of aging through a lifetime that gradually shrinks and recedes from view. Phil here reflects on his life and muses on specific events linked to his progression as an artist, particularly, in fact, almost exclusively during that early period from 95 to 2003, when he recorded as the Mircophones. As he reflects on various events that shaped his progression as an artist and as a person, seeing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in a dingy theater in 2001, hiking with his family as a teenager, touring, endless experiences driving, communing with nature, musing on his place, and of course, plenty of detailed accounts of the process of actually creating his art in those early days. His wrestling with labels, in particular, not record labels, but actual titles for, as he puts it, whatever this thing is. He calls back throughout the record to lyrics that have recurred across his career. There's no end. I will never stop singing this song. Now only. Phil has an incredible talent for poetry, and these lines near the end of the record, I think, encapsulate the essential message of it and the point of his art. Quote, "I hope the absurdity that permeates everything joyfully rushes out and floods the room like water from the ceiling, undermining all of our delicate sensibilities, admitting that each new moment is a collapsing building. Nothing is true but this trembling, laughing in the wind." unquote. Frequently here, and across all his music, Phil makes references to the wind, the sun, the moon, the sensation of glowing, all of these rich and vivid details that color our experiences. And to me, it's not just merely an attempt to commune with nature, but it's an admission that all that all of us amount to is little more than just another part of that nature, another fabric in the scene. That there is effectively no difference between us and the moon and the sun.
Another
and all of
brick
these
in the
things.
wall, if you will.
There is no end in the sense that even once we are gone, the atoms and the dust that communed to form us still remain, the same basic matter as all things, continuous with or without us. This is a neat but not novel sentiment. And what is so beautiful about Microphones in 2020 is the way that it captures it so vividly without expressing it in outright terms. It is perfect poetry in the sense that it evokes this as a sensation rather than as sentiment. We feel it as we listen. That, I think, is why the record opens with such a lengthy, drone-like section of repeated, hypnotic guitar strums. The purpose of this is to pull you into the fabric of the scene, utilizing repetition over and over and over to embed the music in your brain and tie you to it in a sense. Another potential explanation you could have for that opening sequence is that as you're experiencing those first 7 minutes, all the information that you have is that this is a record called Microphones in 2020, and that you were listening to Phil strum an acoustic guitar in a very similar manner as he used to do in those early days. And so what I think the purpose of that is, and the purpose of the why that it goes on for so long, is that Phil intends for you to reflect during this time on what you think Microphones in 2020 means, what you think of Phil's story as a listener. And obviously that interpretation relies heavily on the context familiarity, but I do think that either of those interpretations, one as an attempt to pull you into the sound of the record and one as an attempt to get you to reflect before Phil takes his turn, are both interesting interpretations that I think you could go down either route with for that opening sequence. And this attempt to create this kind of interpersonal relationship between the art and the listener is, I think, a parallel of the relationship between the natural world and Phil himself that he gets at lyrically here. It's really quite beautiful and brilliant, I think. And what adds an additional poignancy to Phil's interest in these ideas, the notion of the impermanence of all things, is that while you come to understand here that this is an interest he has always had since the days of the Microphones, clearly his own brutal and heart-wrenching experiences of grief that he has chronicled across 2 records earlier this decade color and complicate this further. It is not just something that has always been embedded in Phil's music. It is a series of ideas that, through a cosmic, tragic irony, Phil has become bound to through both the death of Genevieve and the way that his expressions of grief on record have come to basically define his musical persona to a new generation of listeners. So in a sense, in reflecting on this period in his 20s where he made the music that has resonated with the most people and that brought him the widest recognition, he subtextually and implicitly also reflects on Crow, as that is the other major work that has brought him recognition and the love of others. And thus the philosophy of a record like The Glow Part 2 becomes filtered through Crow, and we see all of the things that have brought Phil to the exact moment that he is standing there, singing to you. All of it exists in a kind of endless, looping tapestry of images, of thoughts, of memories that stretch out forever, but are also reducible to the exact present moment of their experience and of their recollection. Now only, and there's no end. In the most overtly beautiful moment of the record, roughly 27 minutes in, the acoustic guitars fade away for a surge of beautiful engulfing sounds, what sounds like a gently swelling harmonica, and these really pretty pillowing layers of synths. It's an incredibly emotional moment, and clearly the musical climax of the record, like something out of a late period Sigur Rós album. Notably, it is the first extended section since the intro where Phil stops speaking, acknowledging at once that the language he relies upon, that has in a very real sense dominated many of his most beloved records, cannot always express every feeling, and that communicating your truth is as much about finding the right words as it is knowing when to take a step back and linger in a silent moment and reflect. It took me many listens to figure out exactly what this 2-minute section of beautiful sounds reminded me of most deeply. And it wasn't another artist, or another album, or another song. It wasn't music at all. In fact, it wasn't even another form of art at all. It was sunlight. That's all I've got to say.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Couldn't agree more, too.
I just have some kind of notes kind of bubbling around in my head in response to just some things that have been said that I didn't quite get to in my kind of talking about this record, and that I feel that with each listen for me, the nearly 45 minutes of this album just seemed to get faster and faster with each listen. And that is not only a testament to pacing and just enjoyment, but I feel it's also a testament to what this album is going for, in the sense of your experience with it feeling briefer and briefer. Kind of, as Tyler said, your life, in a sense, getting shorter and shorter. And I just, that's basically the main thing I've been sitting on for a while. But yeah.
Nice.
Tyler, I think your point about sunlight is emblematic of something that this record's probably not getting enough credit for. And that's how impressionistic it is. Because I think if you connect and try to engage with this on a personal level without, like, not independently of Phil, but maybe more in tandem with him, this album can mean and affect you differently in different ways, and to the point where I feel like you can have your own revelation with it. I feel like it exists in such a fluid state, that it exists in such an amorphous and not solid manner, that it allows for that kind of beautiful individual engagement on a level that perhaps people might not immediately get with, just because they're so focused on Phil's narrative.
I agree.
No, yeah. Everyone will hear the same audio that that Phil has recorded, but I feel everyone will picture something entirely different as they listen to it.
Yeah.
Because the world is just such a vast, bountiful place that whatever you can connect this record to is just inevitably going to be completely distinct and personal to you. But do we have any?
Anyone else want to add?
Yeah. Like the fact is about this record is, like, it is what it is, and you can get on board with it.
It is.
You might be failing to show appreciation. Anyway, demonstrating a failure to show appreciation, that's the line. Anyway, this record is what it is, and you can either get on board with that or you can't. But you can't take away from just the achievement of doing this in the first place.
Totally. Okay, shall we rate this record then? Is that
Yeah, I mean, we can't really
Favorite
pick
tracks.
favorite tracks.
microphones in 2020? Microphones in 2020? Microphones in 2020? Least favorite track? Microphones in 2020?
Least favorite track?
My-
Chinese Satellite?
I was gonna fucking say it if you were.
Wow. My favorite track was that moment where it's just a wall of fuzz.
Yeah.
My favorite track is when he rambles about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah.
And my least favorite track is the first 8 minutes. And I'm giving this record a strong 6 out of 10.
My favorite track was
that wasn't a bit.
the five. It was the 5-song suite from Virus by Hacken.
So wait. What's happening?
Jake,
I think Tyler is so beset that Morgan gave it a 6. He's in denial.
someone.
Well, that can't
start.
come as a surprise at this point.
No. I'm not beset that you gave it a 6. I was not expecting you to go first, is all. Because you don't know.
Oh, no, I completely hijacked that.
Yeah.
No.
That's fine. Okay, Morgan has given it a 6. That's fair.
Okay, so Jake.
Just because this album, being what it is a very fluid, very, it is what it is. As said, I am going to give it a rating, just like the album, with an asterisk that this very, very likely will go up in the future, as I have not had nearly enough time to process it as this album so woefully deserves, but I will temporarily keep this at an 8 out of 10.
Very reasonable. August.
Augustus.
Well, I think I've made it pretty obvious. 10 out of 10.
Oh!
Oh! How many episodes?
Yeah!
I mean, legitimately, I thought this would take years.
Well, it's not like about how many episodes, because we can't control what albums came out when. We just got lucky.
That's true.
That's
Yeah.
true, like we did with Punisher for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Maybe
what's
that's me.
for all the correct people?
I'm giving it an 8.
I'm giving this. I'm putting in the podcast canon that Morgan gave it a 6 to spite August because of Gang of Youths.
Okay, so
Morgan's like, I'd like to amend my score to a 4.5.
So my favorite tracks are Spotlight, Soul Control, and Ooh La La.
My favorite track was Pink Diamond.
My least favorite track was the Tinny Synths.
I was about to say, the one thing you can't throw against this album, it does not have any tinny synths.
Yeah.
Saoirse just
Tyler.
brought up Pink Diamond, tying it to the beginning of this podcast, much like Phil ties this album to the beginning of his career.
Look at that!
Tyler, though, what do you give this album?
What do you think I should give it, August? Like,
9.5.
what do you think I would give it based on what I've said?
Based on what you've said,
How do you feel
I
about
feel-
how I feel about this record?
well, how I'm feeling now is that
Wow. I hate you.
I mean, I feel what you've said has, to me, it warrants at least a 9.5, but I mean, I could see you giving it a 10. That would be my ideal choice, but whatever you want to do.
9.5.
Wow.
I think.
Fair do. I just want, we're throwing this back to our first episode. I'm just so amazed how much better I've gotten about talking about music since then. I'm just very happy that that's happened. Anyway.
It's been a journey. It's been a journey.
Okay.
Who wants to take this?
Segue.
Anyway,
Morgan.
Yeah.
Morgan,
Actually, this is going to be very important to what I want to say about this next album, is that Morgan gives context for why the fuck we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Why?
Because otherwise, it's just going to
Morgan.
sound like, why did you pick on this random band? Like,
Wow.
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah. So please, Morgan, explain who this band is and why we're talking about them.
All right. So, the Lawrence Arms are a punk rock band from Chicago, Illinois. They started in the very late 90s, first record being released in 1999, and have since gone on to have a not necessarily massively successful career, but a very consistent one, full of albums that people love. But in the last 15 years or so, they've only released albums every now and then. Like, the gap of time between this one and their last record was 6 years, and the gap of time between that record and Oh Calcutta was 8 years. So they don't get together too often anymore, which is why I felt it very important for me, if nothing else, to cover this record whilst we are doing this show. Because this, I hesitate to call them one of my favorite bands because I've heard all but their first two albums. The notable trilogy of albums that they released in the 2000s of Apathy and Exhaustion, The Greatest Story Ever Told, and Oh Calcutta are, in my opinion, a 9, a 10, and a 10, respectively. Some of my favorite records, some of my favorite punk records, just love them. Absolute classics, in my opinion. So I felt that I owed it to them to at least talk about their most recent effort. And if anyone's not opposed, I'll just go ahead and get on with the review.
Go for it. I'm excited.
Yeah, so this is a bad album. I think it's important to consider the context of this band's career for the past 15 years to understand why this is so massively underwhelming. Is because it's like they go as long as Tool does before making a new record. And it's like, This is what they fart out? Are you kidding me? This underwhelming fucking wet fart of an album is what you come out with after 6 years of doing nothing but touring? This is what you have for me. Dude, Led Zeppelin 1 and 2 were released the same year. What is your excuse? What is your excuse for this wimpy...
What is your major malfunction?
What is your damage?
What happened? What happened? Just...
Are you okay? Like,
in 2 seconds, we reference like Full Metal Jacket and Heathers.
I've had 2 beers very quickly. I'm going to give myself an aneurysm if I don't take a breath. So, I think easily the biggest problem with this record is the fact that it sounds like tissue paper.
Yep.
It's just so impactless and weightless and carries none of the punch that any of their earlier records had. Nay, any punk record that resembles anything good has ever had. You don't listen to a fucking Ramones album and get the same feeling you get while listening to this. That's because the Ramones recorded music and were like, this should have some impact. We should...
the Ramones recorded music. That's the sentence.
Motherfucker, there you go. Sonically, production aside, this sounds like every album they've done, but worse by a marginal degree. It's just the lyrics are... The Lawrence Arms are kind of known for like being witty and tongue-in-cheek with their lyrics when they're in their prime. And, that's not here. It's just the lyric. I mean, do these songs even have lyrics? They don't even mean anything. I don't even, and it's just, which is so frustrating.
In the belly of that,
My favorite song.
Which one?
That one you just sang. That one.
Yeah,
It's just. This is so endlessly frustrating to talk about because I don't hate this record independent of the, just by itself. But considering the context of it being a band that I love and have wanted nothing but good music from, it's just so irritating. Because it's like, what? If you can't, after 6 years away from an already mediocre album, you can't give me something that impacts me and makes me feel the way that your earlier records did. It is time to pack it in. Give up, because I'm tired of it. This is the best you have after 6 years. I mean, I feel like a fucking broken record at this point. I'm going to stop rambling about how much time there's been between records. But it's just so, it's such a blatant rehash of everything they've ever done through a worse filter, through exponentially worse production. In the time between that trilogy of albums that I've mentioned, they went from Fat Records, which is NoFX's record label, to Epitaph, Bad Religion's record label. And it sounds worse. Which leads me to conclude that it was a creative decision to make it sound worse. Because, I mean, they had to have had a bigger budget. Lord knows they're bigger now than they were in 2004 or whatever, just because the benefit of hindsight has given those records such a spotlight, especially in places like Sputnik Music. All of those records do really well. And this one is doing pretty well for whatever fucking reason.
This reminds me of that tweet where it's like, oh yeah, we're making a concept album, and the concept is that it sucks.
Yeah. It's just... Alkaline Trio had a record 2 years ago that was their first in a while, and it was coming off of 2 records that were 3, I'll even say 3, that were not good. They were bad. And they came back with such a punch in the face. It's like, hey, we're still around. We can still make good music. I don't care if one of our members joined Blink-180. It doesn't matter. We're good. We can still write good music. And here's that album, and it's one of their best, and it rules. It's one of my favorite albums, if not my favorite album of that year. And I was very much hoping and praying that this album would be the Lawrence Arms is this thing cursed. And instead, I got the Lawrence Arms is agony and irony, and it sucks.
Hallelujah,
Proceed.
holy shit, where's the Tylenol?
Is that your review?
Yep.
Can I build off your frustration just because, I mean...
Only if I can go after.
Oh, I want to go next. That's fine. I don't really care.
Okay.
No.
You know,
Go ahead, Jake.
the thing is, I'm not as storied with this band as Morgan. I've only heard one other album of theirs, and it was because Morgan recommended it to me, and that's O Calcutta. And O Calcutta is great for all the reasons this album sucks a fat one. Like, that album is loud and punky, and, like, even at points it gets kind of lyrically rambly just because, like, the songwriting is, like, actually kind of good. And, like, you know, maybe one might even say ambitious. Whereas here, like, the actual construction of the songs is the first major problem of the songs here. This is a 38-minute long album, and it has a shitload of tracks, which means all of these songs are half-formed ideas, a chorus and a half long, verses that don't sound like anything. And as Morgan mentioned, I have started, the comparison I used in the chat yesterday was that this entire album sounds like wet loose leaf paper, which it does. And the most remarkable thing about it is that, like, it befuddles me. Morgan mentioned, he said that this is like a creative decision to make it sound this way. Whereas I'm just thinking here, just spitballing, you could just take the levels and the EQ and the gain and just turn it up by like 30 or 40%, and this album would at least like be loud and it would sound like it's something. But the album's like actually quiet, like it's mixed very lowly for some fucking reason. And with a punk album, you know, what the fuck ever. It's not like this album is like going for a low-key vibe or anything. This sounds like every pop-punk album you have ever fucking heard. The vocal performances are wholly unenthusiastic, tepid as hell. All of them lack passion. All of them lack energy. And when bands are coming around, when you have bands like the Menzingers who have been around for north of a decade, and they're still coming in sounding just as young as they did when they released shit like On the Impossible Past, and this guy sounds like, I mean, like, do they have two separate singers? Okay,
It sounds like
one of them sounds like every pop punk singer who has ever walked the face of the planet, but like bad. The other singer sounds like fucking like Linda Hamilton post Terminator 2 smoking 86 packs of Lucky Strikes a day because his voice is so comically raspy.
It
and
sounds like
bad
if Tom
sounding.
Waits joined Blink-182.
It sounds like someone is doing a bad Tom Waits impersonation, like they're just trying to sound like, I'm trying to sing like
There's
this.
a band I'll more directly compare them to, and I want to bring this up now. It reminds me so much.
Oh, go.
Okay, it reminds me so much of what Fugazi does, where you have Ian MacKaye and I forget the other guy's name, but he's got this kind of raspy, growly voice. Ian MacKaye's got this big, energetic voice. It reminds me of that same, like, dynamic in terms of vocal performances, except if Ian MacKaye didn't care, and if the other guy was, like you said, doing a shitty Tom Waits, and also didn't care.
The thing about the shitty Tom Waits guy is that Brendan Kelly has had a terrible voice always. And he gets through that by giving his performances everything he can. And it sounds great on their earlier records. And instead, he shows up to this record asleep, and it's like, in the belly of the whale, where the belly damage, in the belly of the whale, where the damage, in the belly of the whale. Fucking stop!
I'm up all night for good fun. I'm up all night
Remarkably
to
similar to Foreign Affairs in the delivery and how like that's the thing too, is that both of them are like the both the hooks and the performances are like clumsy. Like they just sound off and labored and like they're trying, and I'm just like, this is not hard. Like Morgan talked about the Ramones. The Ramones songwriting was not their fucking strong point. Their songwriting was the same alternating 3 sentences for the first half of their career, and they managed to get by on it because they wrote songs like Blitzkrieg Bop, which fucking bang. This, on the other hand, it's like it's got clumsy melodies, and it's just so malformed, and it's not charming in the slightest. And like immediately after, just to wash the taste out of my mouth, I started listening to one of my favorite punk albums of the last decade. I listened to Pup's Morbid Stuff, which is an album where it is like all of them sound, despite how long they've been in the scene, they sound like a bunch of like snotty teenagers, which is why that album works. And the vocal performances are loud, and you've got songs like Full Blown Meltdown, which is like basically a fucking thrash metal song, and it rules. And here, every single fucking idea is just like, you're just listening to these barely mixed fucking guitars and these repetitive song structures that barely last long enough, and it makes 38 minutes feel like a fucking century. It's like, I feel like I could, like, time is being spaced out and diluted, and I could listen to Go Farther in Lightness 3 times before this album is over, and it's bad.
The funniest thing about everything you just said is that, like, you said a couple of times, this is 38 minutes long.
Yeah, I was about to say.
34
It's 34. It's 34.
But it's funny that you thought it was longer than it was.
Oh God, you're right. That's so much worse. That's basically another song.
All right, I want to pick up on something you said. You said this is an album that features half-formed ideas. And I want to ask you, please, to show me one fucking idea this album has. Even half-formed.
I got one. It's their trilogy of records that people really like.
But again, presumably.
This is not music. I'm sorry. I have to take a fucking stand at some point.
I love that you say this isn't music the same week we're talking about Autechre. And it's just like...
You're so... Look, at least with Autechre, they give you something to talk about. Even
absolutely.
Like, nothing.
Absolutely.
If you think it sounds like shit, fine, we can talk about that. But this is just a fucking void. A cans of nothing for 34 minutes. There's not a single gesture at something might be vaguely interesting by accident. This is awful. Like, for me, I've always been clear about this. I've always been upfront about the fact that, for me personally, music that's just bland is more offensive and irritating than music that's actively, like, going against the, logic of what good music is. Like, it's bad, like, in all these very, very standout ways. And, like, because at least with music like that, you can focus your critique on something. Or on things. Some kind of thing that can be notable and can be dissected for why it is a failure. But here the cardinal sin is simply that they don't seem like they want to be doing this at all.
No.
It's not an average album to me. It's a shitty fucking album. It's impressive how across 14 breezy, fast-paced, punk-inflected indie rock tracks, there's not a single interesting musical idea. The record's chances are hampered by, as people have already mentioned, by the most dry, charisma-sucking production that absolutely saps all the instrumentation and all the already weak vocals of any shred of power they might possibly have dreamed of having. I suspect stripping these songs down entirely to acoustic guitar might result in a better record, if at least a listenable one. Look, I know I'm being over the top here, but like I have not had an experience this unpleasant in a while, and it's just for. I know it's like, how? It's such a nothing record. How could it be that much of an unpleasant experience? Especially when you just listen to Metallica's Reload and then... and yes, I did. But I got what they were going for, even if they failed at pretty much every attempt on that record. Here, I don't understand what they're trying to do. I don't get it. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe, because like, things can be bad because they're a failure at something. But the worst shit is bad, and you don't know why it's bad. You just know that it is, and you start to question your sanity. You start to think, hang on, have I actually like forgotten what is good? Have I forgotten like what music is? Because this makes me never want to listen to music again. At least never makes me want to listen to music like this again, I should say, because that's obviously I'm being hyperbolic here.
That's why I had to listen to an album in this genre that I liked immediately after just to check myself.
And the one album, like, okay, so we're talking 2020, right? So the one album you all keep saying is the worst possible piece of shit this year has produced is Green Day's Father of All. And I had heard a few songs on it, but I hadn't listened to the full thing. So I went and did that just before we recorded this. And that album is amusical and just shitty. And I agree with every fucking single thing that any of you have said about it in terms of its own inherent quality. It's a piece of shit. I narrowly dislike this more. Because at least you can listen to the Green Day album and it's like produced, even if the production is in aid of emptiness musically. Here, you can't even listen to the emptiness because it makes you want to throw your headphones across the room. Look, I'm not going to turn this into a competition between these two albums. They're both fucking awful and they both deserve to be buried. And it's not about which one's worse. But I had to listen to that just to, convince myself I wasn't going crazy.
Angry Tyler.
Am I taking crazy pills? Am I the only one around here that cares about the goddamn rules?
The thing is, the band sounds so distant in this recording. It sounds as though the producer put the mics in a different room because even he couldn't bear to hear how far this band has fallen.
This is a man who hasn't even heard their other albums.
I know, but I believe they're good. I believe it. I just, I don't even need, I will maybe listen to them because of the love that's been experienced and because I feel like I'm being a real bastard to this band. So I probably should do them a favor and really give their other stuff a listen.
Yeah,
I believe
saying
from a place where they were making great art and it just makes me so angry that they have produced this coming from that place. More angry than I would be if this was a band that had always been shit. Because here I just feel like, why? You know better. I know you know better. So why are you doing this?
Yeah, no, I was saying any album that anyone creates is worse than Father of All is maybe the meanest thing you can say to anybody. But,
Look, and I haven't even, I wanted to say, when I listened to this the second time, because I did listen to it more than once, because the first time, admittedly, it was on in the background and I was doing other things, and that's not the way I like to listen to records, especially ones I'm going to review. So I've given it 2 more attentive listens, believe it or not.
One could argue that that's the only way you come to this album.
Yeah, and look, in my attentive listens, I tried to make notes about individual songs and why, again, I've already said, I couldn't get it. I didn't understand why I was having such a. I knew the production was bad. I knew there was a lack of ideas, but I couldn't really get into this record's head like I tried to do with a really bad album and really kind of understand why it ticks. And that's what makes listening to bad albums, as unpleasant as of an experience it can be quite a rewarding one in a certain sense because you get a little bit more understanding about what it is you like about music, what it is you dislike about music, and how to evaluate music. But I didn't gain anything from this experience except suffering. One song I want to highlight though, the worst song of 2020, an absolute wafting fart of a track, and if it's not the one that Jake's picked, then I'll be surprised. But I mean, admittedly there are lots of contenders here, but the one that really made me lose hope in humanity is Ghostwriter.
Yes!
That song is just self-parody. How long can we sing the same old tired songs? There's a real lyric in the song. And I finally am pleased to say that after all this reflection, I know the answer to that question, and the answer is 34 minutes.
Mic drop.
And while Tyler is gone, can I just say that while he is correct, Ghostwriter is absolutely the worst fucking song on this godforsaken thing. The worst moment of this album does not occur on Ghostwriter. The worst moment of this album occurs on the song How to Rot.
Oh, that's my worst song on the album. That's mine.
The vocal effects in the middle of How to Rot. I mean, what? Why? Why? Who? When? Where? Why? How? What on earth?
The sad thing is Ghost Rider is comfortably in my top 3 favorites on this album.
You know what?
Right.
That's not an awful take. I'm
And
going
I
to
don't-
leap in here.
I don't
Sorry, yeah.
fully disagree with Tyler either, which is the problem.
Anyway, I'm going to leap in here. So
Go
I've
ahead,
listened to this
leap.
album 3. Thank you. I've listened to this album 3 times. The first 2 times, because I'm a pretty busy bitch, I had it on in the background while doing other things. And I thought, you know what? This sounds just like any other punk rock album. If I go on the Lawrence Summers Wikipedia page, punk rock's the only genre listed there. Can't understand why. This is just, doing those beats. It's fine. Then I sat down and listened to it academically to take notes, at which point it became one of the worst records I've heard this year. If Alkaline Trio became better because one of their members went to join Blink-182, maybe someone from this band should have joined Sum 41. I don't know. I feel like Morgan did his waiting 12 years of it in Azkaban, and nothing came of it. This
album feels like spending 12 years in Azkaban.
God, this album reminds me of like late career Terrence Malick, where like you wait so long for a movie and then it's shit. It reminds me of 3 artists in particular, one of which is The Messengers. Like, I spent this whole record wanting to listen to good things, and I don't want to be an arsehole anymore.
What a good song.
Bruce Springsteen, a lot actually, was on this record, and also
He was
a
on
band I
the
loved. His fingerprints are on this record, sort of in terms of influence, but it's much worse than anything he's made.
Played vibraphone on this record.
And well, it's just got that like big Americana space to it, that big openness that I get from him.
Space
Anyway,
to it in the sense that it's a fucking void.
good diss. I love it.
Also, shut up. You've had your turn.
Sorry.
Shut up,
The
bitch.
third band is an album. Is a band I have. Their latest album on vinyl called Days and Days, who I love. This is their latest album, released by Fat Records, if you didn't see, which apparently this band used to be on. They are a folk punk band. Tyler said this album might be better if it was played entirely on acoustic guitars. This is evidence of that. And the new album is one of my favorite records of the year. Aside from that, in a Spalding Gray inspired piece of performance art monologuing, I'm going to read you some notes I have. I have very few notes on each song, so this won't take long. But for Quiet Storm, very straightforward, mixed like ass. Messengers meet Springsteen. PTA, I have nothing. Belly of the Whale, kind of meaningless. Dead Man's Coat, boring. Pigeons and Spies, annoying. Last words, more musically interesting. It's got better production. The Demon, I liked it more. I put a star next to it, but I have no notes. Ghostwriter, it's got a half decent hook. I have no other notes on the song. It's very boring. How to Rot dares to reference Brandy and Forever Young. Just dares to reference those songs, obnoxious vocal delivery, and that's before we get to what's later in the song. It starts off with the Tom Waits motherfucker, who's much worse, just doing one of the most obnoxious vocal deliveries I have heard on the first line to a song in years, and it might just be because it's mixed like ass, but I doubt it. Although it is mixed like ass. And then what, in big capital letters, what are these vocals? Just
Thank you.
what mind was like, we're going to make a 34-minute punk record with Chipmunk's vocals? It's just, what mind? Under Paris, I have better. That's the only word. Damning with faint praise. Goblin Fox Hunt, annoying vocals, still better. Lose Control. I think it's the only sort of genuinely good song, even though it's like a 6. It's the only one I'm ever going to consider returning to. Don't Look at Me, I Have Nothing. Coyote Crown, I have long and boring, and it's 3.5 minutes long. I can't believe I ever thought this record was fine.
It's the thing about it is it's just so acceptable
Deceitful.
if you are not paying attention.
Exactly. Like the first 2 listens, I was editing video essays, which is what I get paid to do. I was applying for jobs to get paid more. I was just doing shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I heard it and it was like, this sounds like a lot of other punk records I think are good. Therefore, association, I can bear to tolerate. I can, if I came across a song like this on like a Spotify made for you Discover Weekly playlist, I wouldn't be upset. But then I listened to a whole album of it. Like, look, it's not. I don't dislike it as much as Tyler. I think it's not as bad as the Logic record. It's not as bad as Father for Motherfuckers. It's just very boring. It's very boring, and for a punk record, that's there is no way that can be interpreted well.
August, what would you like to say about this album?
It's very good.
I've got a fair bit to say.
Oh
In
boy!
fact,
Dear
I'm
God.
First off,
excited.
let's get to the heart of what the punk genre is, because that is very important to my discussion here. Punk was a form of music created to kind of rebel against the long, bloated radio rock of the 70s, the 15-minute prog songs that just were completely vapid and meaningless, and make something with a political edge that was catchy, it was short, it got to the point. For me, when I listen to a punk album, my mindset is to always think about what the artist is saying. What point are you trying to make? I listened to this album 4 times. 4 times. Very closely. I cannot tell you a goddamn thing any person in the Lawrence Arms stands for. What is your political stance? I would have a better chance guessing who they're going to vote for, or if they're going to vote in the 2020 election. I would have a better chance flipping a coin, associating a candidate to each side, and then catching that coin and seeing what the result was, than I would have discerning any political, any social, anything from any of the lyrics in this album. I just have no idea what you're talking about. What do you stand for? What does any of this mean? What is any of this? It's just like the lyrical equivalent of white noise, at least with fucking Sam Hunt, even though he's making some of the most overtly offensive, sexist, misogynistic songs I've heard this year. At least I can get behind the fact that, oh yeah, this guy's some dumbass who, I don't know, is going to vote for Trump or something. When I listen to this, what am I hearing? I'm hearing television static. And I made the point during our Lamb of God review that the drums on that album all sounded like ass. Thing about Lamb of God is I know what they stand for. I know what Lamb of God is. I don't know what a Lawrence Arms is. What the hell is a Lawrence Arms? Can anyone explain to me from exclusively this record? No, you can't. It's impossible.
This album
And-
made The Lamb of God, self-titled, sound like fucking OK Computer.
That is
it
fucking
does.
true.
I love
Because
how we
here's the
reviewed The
thing.
Lamb of God and we were like, this is the worst record we have ever reviewed on this podcast.
And then we reviewed Taylor Swift. Then we reviewed Logic. Now we're reviewing this piece of shit.
This is worse than all of them.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
Not Logic,
That's-
but yeah.
Oh, and here's
That's
the other
fucking
thing. Here's another point I want to bring up. Because I brought that Lamb of God review up for a very specific reason, because the drums sound like ass on this record. I have no fucking clue what guitar chord they're playing, or if there's a variation between the guitar chords or notes they're playing, because the production is so muffled, so thin. Like Morgan called the Jeff Rosenstock album, the guitars on that a little thin. That looks like a fucking slab of concrete compared to like the Planck length of thickness this album is.
Love a good Planck length reference.
Oh my god, this, like, and the guitars, it just, like I said, it just sounds like you could very well be just playing one chord and punking me, and I wouldn't know the difference. Is this some sick joke just to see what's acceptable at this stage in their career? As has been mentioned, the two singers, no charisma. There's not a modicum of charisma between either of them. Like, this empty glass. This is some, like, remaining fluid in it, so this does not even encapsulate the lack of charisma there is in this album.
And even if there was no fluid, it still has ornamentation on it. Still looks kind of nice.
Yeah, that's true. Another fun point about this record, fun note, is that just, oh my god, the songs are the most, if you do try and listen to the lyrics, which I tried 3 times, I just went to another page because I couldn't bear to sit through these awful lyrics. There is no past. The future has been cast. What the hell are we talking about? What does that mean? That's the stupidest fucking thing.
Like every time I would like narrow my focus to the singing when I was trying to focus on this record, every single time without question, it was some of the most insipid, like meaningless, just fucking 5-year-old shit in the world.
Yeah. Oh, and I mean, The Skeleton Coast, what a fitting title, because this album has no meat on it.
It makes us want to dive into the ocean.
And you know, the other thing it evokes is a rotting fucking whale carcass.
Wow.
Just a big, washed-up whale carcass sitting on the beach.
It smells bad.
It smells bad. It's being stripped to the bone. Like seagulls are...
is the remnants of something that once used to be great.
Oh, yeah. Like a beautiful, like, blue whale carcass just rotting in the hot sun. All of the beautiful texture and all the mollusks just turn to this white, pulpy sludge with, like, blood spewing out of every possible orifice. It's... What the fuck are you doing?
That's a very sad fate for Ween.
No, it's...
Fucking me.
I feel sorry for Ween just by the association of the concept of a mollusk to a whale.
Yeah, an association that you have created for
Yeah.
This association I've created. I feel sorry I did that. And, you know, I thought this... I was like, Saoirse, I thought this was fine when I first listened to it, but then you just try and sit with it, and you're like, what did I listen to? I could have just listened to...
This is the record I dislike so much it makes me feel sorry for people named Lawrence.
I already
Xavier
feel bad
Dolan
for people
movies
named Lawrence.
rocking.
Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
David Lean
Yeah.
rolling in his grave.
I mean, it just tries to distract you with the fact that it sounds kind of vaguely like something you've heard before, and then
The
you
afterbirth
just...
of punk music.
Right. Just literally, just listen to the Messengers instead, and you'll get everything.
Yeah, and the main
Or
singer.
Thank you.
listen to early Lawrence Arms, which I'm sure is probably good. I feel sorry this is my first exposure to them.
Yeah,
I feel terrible.
It's a real Lamb of God situation for me as well, where I'm like, I believe this band were once amazing, but, you know, I just feel bad that I've walked in at this particular juncture.
This is the last time I recommend we cover a new release. Jesus.
No, please do. This has been so fun.
No,
I mean,
I've had
it is
tremendous
truly
fun.
I'm glad you all had fun. Carry on.
Okay, anyways, 3 least favorite tracks. Favorite track?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right then. Okay.
Yeah.
Shall we wrap this up?
Yeah, I want to be
Yep.
clear. Like all my passionate vitriol and distaste is for this album, not for the band. Like specifically, like I will still listen to other things that they do. I'm going to go back and listen to their earlier stuff just to prove a point to myself that I believe that they're good. And I mean, if I don't happen to agree that they are, then I promise you'll never hear from me about it. It's a bad album. People go through rough patches in their lives, not everything works. And I know I was really harsh and vitriolic. And I mean,
Yeah.
that is, probably partly due to the fact that, this album was surrounded by me listening to Metallica's Load and Reload and Green Day's Father of All. And now the fact that I know that as soon as we're done doing this, the first thing I have to do for the sake of time is I have to go and listen to Saint Anger. So, because we're doing our Metallica episode for our viewers, recording our Metallica episode next week. But yeah, so I know I've been mean, and actually I apologize because I think I took it too far. And I'm, I recognize that it's not fun to have to listen to, even if it's an album you dislike, it's still not fun to have to listen to people, tear the shit out of people who have made something that means something to you. So, yeah. Just an acknowledgement of that. I'm sorry for being such a douchebag about it.
No, that was, I mean, it just puts me in a strange place where it's like, this is great content, but I would rather be anywhere else right now.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I don't even feel that dissimilarly. It's just, it comes from like a place of pure disappointment for me rather than abject dislike, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's
I don't
fair.
know.
No.
All right,
No,
let's go.
I generally think Morgan has excellent taste, so I'd happily listen to anything
so
he
do
recommends in the future.
Yeah, it's just a question of like artists staying good. Like they need to keep making good albums. I'm sure, like when Between the Buried and Me release a new album, we'll review that, and it'll be a great time, and we'll probably really enjoy it. And it will probably be really challenging but rewarding. Certainly won't be anything like this. Try.
Yeah, if it's not challenging and rewarding, that's going to be a whole lot more devastating than this ever was.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
anyway.
Okay, let's go. Let's do the round table then and get this over with.
Yeah.
Which order, lads?
Just do our normal order. Jake, you go
Sure.
first.
All right. So, I guess this is the most damning thing about it. My 3 least favorite tracks, I'll say How to Rot, Ghostwriter, and I'm going to leave the third spot blank. Because I can't fucking remember any of the other songs enough to actually pick one. And favorites, podcast joke, Chinese Satellite, what the fuck ever. Honest to God, August's segment was so good. He talked me into lowering this by a half a decimal, and I'm going to say that I'm going to give this a 2 out of 10, and I will say as a closing statement, the only way this album could be enjoyed is if you took every single song on it, slowed it down by 700%, and applied reverb, and suddenly called it a shoegaze / post-rock album.
I would happily listen to a Vaporwave cover of this whole album.
That's nice for you, honey.
August.
Oh boy. 3 least favorite tracks are my 3.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. Belly of a Whale, The Ghost Rider, and I don't know, fucking Quiet Storm, I guess. something or other. My favorite track, I don't know why, but I wrote down Last Words. I'm struggling. I'll say 1.5.
Morgan.
4 out of 10. Let's move the fuck on.
So my favorite tracks included Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance.
I'm so slow. I'm like, wait, Spirit of Vengeance, was that a song?
Lose Control and Goblin Fox Santa Money's favorite song was How to Rot, which sucks ass. And I'm giving this record a 3.
Okay. Since I'm being so harsh, I'm not gonna do least favorite tracks. I'll highlight one song that I think is still kind of bad, but like at least you can hear it. It's Last Words. If I had heard that in passing without the context of this record, I without having already been annoyed by what precedes it, I might have something approaching enjoying it. But it's, there are other things on this record that I don't care for as much as whatever. Oh, I'm so bad at words. I ramble. I hate that.
You're doing fine. You're doing
I'm
fine.
sorry.
Charlie.
I just feel really
Oh,
bad.
that's sweet.
I'm giving this album 1 out of 10.
That's fair, dude.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, officially our lowest review.
The fun thing about this is that you all are giving this like 3s and 2s and 1s, and I think it is the dumbest shit I have ever heard anyone give a rating for. But I'm just not in your brains,
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good observation.
I'm gonna go get a drink. I'll be right back.
This is, if nothing else, a lesson in not projecting your opinion onto other people.
Definitely. All right, I'm gonna.
Rock on Chicago. Wheaties. The Breakfast of Champions.
Listen to Spanish love songs.